So I don't know if anybody saw this, right? It's been kind of doing the rounds on Twitter, and it's sent a lot of people's minds into meltdown. Although it's not really what it looks like. It's a little different to the kind of way that it's being framed, but it's worth covering anyway because it's pretty funny. And that's that Rishi Sunak will ask stores to cap basic food prices. Number 10 is in discussions with supermarkets over a French-style approach to the cost of living crisis. It's drawing up plans for retailers to introduce price caps on basic food items such as bread and milk until it help tackle the cost of living, the Telegraph can disclose. Sunak's aides have started working a deal with supermarkets akin to agreement in France, in which countries' major retailers charge the lowest possible amount for some essential food products. So it's worth noting, right, that this isn't actual price caps. I know a lot of people on Twitter in the replies are all talking about this being the Soviet Union Mark II, and believe me, I think it's funny they're talking about this, and it's funny it's coming from Rishi Sunak given the state of the economy. It's all very Ted Heath right now. But this isn't actually a price cap. Engaging this is entirely voluntary. And it's literally the point at which this is the point. This is how much control, right? This is how much control the corporations have on how we go about our daily lives. Is that the government has to go there and literally fucking beg the management of these massive food companies not to raise their prices, getting on bended knees. Oh, please, small bean CEO, can you please not make sure to raise the prices so that the people in this country are impoverished, right? Literally begging on bended knee to ensure that the economic nature of our country doesn't fucking collapse underneath its own weight, right? But of course, obviously the fucking free market types are all absolutely going. They're pissing blood over this news article, even though it's not real price controls. The fact that Rishi Sunak even wants to ask companies to interfere with price signals, for example, to not let the market just do its thing to appease the great gods of marketization. It just tells you about how little these people care about the genuine utility of the things that they propose, because the market is God. These people, not even direct interference with the market, but just requesting for supermarkets to put the market to one side for a small moment to ensure that only a couple of basic food items are affordable for working class people. This is seen as too much government intervention for these people, if you can imagine such a thing, right? So, I mean, it's a very weird situation to be in, but anyway, I digress. The move would be the biggest attempt to manage supermarket prices since controls established by Heath in 73. However, Number 10 insists that any action by retailers would be voluntary. It comes amid growing concern in government about sustained pressure on household finances from inflation and the rising cost of borrowing. A Treasury source said food inflation is much more resilient and difficult to get rid of than we anticipated. Telegraph can also disclose that continued inflation and increases in gilt yields are throwing into doubt Mr. Sunak's aspiration to cut personal taxes before the next general election. So it's interesting to think about in that. So what's interesting, they've specifically chosen things like bread and milk, for example. Now, there are some parts of our food economy which is being the result of profiteering and things like that. And I think bread probably would come under that category. But you can't really do this with milk. Milk is already heavily subsidized by the government because the demand is really not there for it, especially in a world where plant-based milks are more readily available and in some cases cheaper to be able to consume rather than regular milk. The actual profit margin on milk production in this country is fucking next to nothing. That's how much subsidy they get. The idea that any supermarket is going to agree to dropping the prices on milk products, given the ways in which the supply cannot ever increase to meet the demand that we have without prices going up on that one, because there's just no profit involved in this at all, is completely nonsensical, right? Whereas, something the stupidly high amount, as Davinia points out in chat. Whereas things like bread, I think there is enough of a profit margin that's being made by people who are procuring this stuff and people who are manufacturing this stuff. These profit margins can be eaten into to ensure that people have affordable things, right? If you're just doing it for a couple of key items, then you can assume that what this government is asking these companies to do is to subsidize some essentials, use them as a loss leader to be able to ensure they're making profits elsewhere in whatever their current inventory is. Now, I really don't think this is going to work. I don't think any of the companies will agree to this. I think it really is pissing into the wind. But it just shows you the level to which things are absolutely screwed up for the economy at the moment. And that, this is desperate times for desperate measures. Obviously, this should have been happening way earlier, right? If the Conservatives want to win the next election, they've got to ensure that people's cost of living comes down. That they've got to ensure that people can actually afford to feed themselves and clothe their kids. That's got to be the main priority for a Conservative government that wants to win an election, just like Heath was doing in '73. And they're going to have to abandon some principles in the case for wanting to there be an electoral victory next year. It really is worth pointing out when people kind of talk about the Conservatives like they're fully driven by ideology, and that's not really true, right? Because really and truly, they have a singular ideology, and the singular Conservative ideology is maintaining power at all costs. They'll make alliances of convenience with the private sector, with the super rich, to be able to fund disinformation campaigns to keep them in power. And there is some amount of ideology within, liberal capitalism that comes and underpins a lot of what they do and will do and won't do. But they will happily give up all of these things. They will happily give up all of their principles, just like the Tory Remainers did with Brexit. There's another example. They will give up and completely abandon all of their principles as long as they looks like it's going to be the best way of them maintaining power, winning the next election, and ensuring that their pockets get stuffed full of the pound notes that they want to have them stuffed full with, to be able to use that for personal enrichment and for personal power. And that's what's happened here, right? They've abandoned, right? We're going to abandon leaving the market up to everything because we know that it's unsustainable. And if we keep doing it, we will lose a huge portion of our voter base, who are the kind of people that Gary was talking about in the video that we just saw. Middle class people who are feeling themselves become more insecure than they have ever been because of the wealth that's filtered up to the rich people in this country at the expense of working class people. Now all the poor have been impoverished as much as they can be. Middle class people suddenly feeling insecure are going to move their vote away from the Conservative Party that they've always been in the voter base of. They're going to move away from that if they don't see some security coming to their lives. And that's what Rishi Sunak is trying to do here. Make sure that food inflation comes down somewhat by asking very nicely, pretty please, corporations, would you like to bring food prices down? Because he thinks it's the only way that he can come towards actually winning the election, by improving the security of their voter base, which is dwindling every day. But unfortunately, agriculture is going to become more expensive over time. We've got to find more efficient ways of doing these kind of things. And maybe higher food price things that we're going to have to deal with, especially if we're not going to fundamentally restructure how we provide food in this country, how the food market model even works in this country. Because, as I've said on stream a couple of times already, you look at Nordic countries where almost 40% in some countries of grocery retail is done as a cooperative, a consumer cooperative rather than a private company. There's no profit motive, right? They cannot ever use inflation as an excuse to be greedy, to increase prices more than they need to be increased to be able to maximize profits, for example. The kind of greedflation that we're seeing at the moment. And that's what consumer cooperatives on the grocery end are going to be able to properly fight against. And that's what we should, that's the kind of, again, structural reform we need is more participation in the higher echelons of the economy, more cooperatives, both worker and consumer, for example. We need more workers on corporate boards. We need more workers being shareholders of their companies. We need more inclusive ownership. This is the real fix for everything that we are seeing right now. We need more inclusion of the working class into the decisions that get made around these kind of things, rather than just leaving it up to private individuals, because we've seen, right, up to this point, it's not helped at all because they've continued raking in profits at the expense of everybody else. And it's not worked as far as the government are concerned, because now they're having to step in and beg on bended knee for corporations to start making their products affordable again. So this is not a solution that's really, really going to work in the long and short of things. But, if you have a government that's entirely committed to ensuring that rich people maintain their profits, rather than spreading those amongst the population, this is the only place you're ever going to end up. With all of the corporations having all of the power, the government having no power because they've gifted it to the corporations, and then them having to literally fucking beg to be given some of that power back. And it won't work, right? They've got the taste of the power now. They've got the taste of the dividends, of the rewards of the money that's gone to them. And so why would they ever change tack on this, right? They don't have to care. They are a moral institution, right? The singular desire of businesses is to drive profits for shareholders. That's their fiduciary responsibility. The moral concerns about whether or not they are providing products that working class people can afford does not come into any of their remit, because there's no moral considerations being made at all when they're coming and constructing policy. When they're deciding what their prices are, they use the price signals. They take those price signals to maintain the best price to maximize profits. That's it. That's the only decision that gets made. The thing is, when you look at what's happened in France, for example, let's read again. Um, in France, supermarkets have signed up to a deal with the government. Each identifies items in their own shops that could be subject to price freezes or reductions. In many cases, own brand items were selected on the basis that retailers found it easiest to control their costs. But one source briefed on the plan warned that it would be anti-market and could harm smaller retailers who could lose business to supermarkets offering cut-price items. The source added it's very easy to point the finger at retailers and say they're making a fortune, but some of the margins they're operating on are not that big. It's quite tight. And that's the thing is they can subsidize basics with lower profits, with the money they're making elsewhere in their overall remit, right? You can use it as a loss leader. Loads of companies do loss leaders. It's not anti-market to do a loss leader. But I do, and I've not seen whether the France system has even worked. It'd be worth looking and seeing how France does with this and see whether that might actually come to fruition in the UK. But I don't have any hopes for it at all. I really don't have any hopes that will actually sort out the problems. I mean, even then, the proposals are only a drawing board stage. The idea that it's going to come in anytime soon and provide any amount of relief in the short term, it's a dreamland, really. The pressure is such that we are working with retailers on anything that can be done in their ends to bring down prices for consumers. Make it a cooperative, basically it, right? That's all you can really do. So yeah, brilliant. Comrade Rishi coming through with the price controls, trying to make life better for the working class. We are absolutely. If he was in the Labour Party, he would literally get thrown out for being a Marxist, really, wouldn't he? At least, well, to be fair, looking at this article here, the French finance minister who set the deal in the first place is saying that they are extending the deal to another quarter because it has been it's worked out okay so far for them to be able to ensure that some good comes out of it. If it wasn't doing any good, they wouldn't be extending it. What's interesting though is that the French finance minister from the incredibly pro-capitalist and kind of soft right Renaissance party who are in control of the French government has threatened to raise taxes on retailers to recover profits unfairly made on the back of consumers if they refuse to lower prices. So literally, the French are doing way more than the Conservatives are because they're actually threatening, they are blackmailing the food sector to implement taxes on them if they don't bring prices down. And that's really what the government should be doing. Rather than just arbitrarily setting a price cap or begging, like pleading with them to bring prices down, threaten them, right? Threaten them with some kind of back end policy to be able to feed into cost of living for the general population through emergency taxation, which is what the French are threatening here, which is clearly far more comprehensive than just please, Mr. CEO, please bring down the prices, we beg you, which is what's happening from Rishi Sunak right now. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing. It does help out the channel and the algorithm. And if you click the bell notification icon, it will let you know when I go live and when I upload videos. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my handle is @NoJusticeMTG, and that is Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. If you want to support my channel in a more financial manner, you can do so by becoming a member for just 99p, by super chatting, or by supporting me on Patreon, with the link is in the description of this video, and hopefully I'll catch you on the next segment.